Subcommittee meeting to order at 1:05. And welcome Mr. Lagonia as our new co-chair. Thank you for being here. And
Thank you.
Welcome to our new sheriff, Sheriff Krapp. And is it Captain Rivero? I'm sorry for not knowing are you the captain?
Not unless you know something that I don't.
Okay. Is it Deputy Rivero? Lieutenant, thank you. I knew there was a title. Lieutenant Rivero, thank you for joining us. So as a kind of large overview, for the most part, so far, this committee has focused mainly on body camera policy. That was the first thing that we started working on. We have looked a little bit as well at the Citizen Review Board. And even a bigger overview, the reason this committee is here is because we adopted a plan, and part of that plan was to have an implementation committee to look at some of the action items plan. And as of now, body camera policy and Citizen Review Board have been the two action items from that plan that we have looked at and focused on. So the first thing I'd like to review is where we're at with the body camera policy, because that is the one that we've had the most conversation on. And I say it with the caveat that when we met prior, there was a different sheriff in office, and this committee is here to make recommendations and advise as to what we as a committee feel would be best practice. But at the end of the day, it is the sheriff that has the ability to set policy within his office. So there may be things that we as a committee recommended and Sheriff Bartlett agreed with and to that Sheriff Krapp may feel differently about. So I'm saying it with that caveat because there may be areas where we felt like we had, reached a conclusion and we might and look at it again. So the first document, and maybe Michael, Sherry, great, awesome. The first document we're going to look at is a document that this committee has been using to look at. It's a document that Supervisor Committees created, dated April 5th of 2021. And it focuses specifically on body cameras and has some recommendations to the policy that we as a committee looked at one by one. So I did want to go through, there's number 1 through number 8, and I just wanted to update the new committee members and the new sheriff on kind of where we were at when we last met in October. Do you mind, Sherry, scrolling down just to that number 1, the set buffer mode? So while we're waiting for it to scroll down, number 1 talks about a buffer mode. And again, this is where I'm going to defer to someone else in case I misspeak, but the buffer mode is what is recorded and kept from when the officer pushes the button to start recording. So if a buffer mode is set at 30 seconds, from when they press that recording button, it's going to record back and keep everything that happened 30 seconds prior. If you set it 120 seconds, it's going to go back 2 minutes and go to what was set prior. There was a lot of conversation back and forth about, both sides, why it might make sense to have a longer buffer mode to protect. One example I used is if a guy yells gun and then a trooper or sheriff or deputy acts accordingly. But by the time they press, that might not be the first thing they think of to press their button. By the time they press their button and it's only if that wasn't actually caught, and it could look like their actions were inappropriate because you didn't hear that that's what actually occurred. And then there was also the other side, which was, if an officer is using the restroom or maybe having a private conversation with his colleague at work, is there potential privacy concerns or issues? And then we talked about potential redaction processes. So if it was, something like that where they were in the bathroom or something totally not relevant to the case or to the recording, that there could be a process of redaction if appropriate. Essentially, this is one of the items. There are 3 items that the union wanted to and myself, Supervisor Benvenuto. We did meet one time with Elena, the labor attorney, and the next step was to meet with the union, which has not happened. So I will put that on my to-do list. I will follow up with Elena. Obviously, Supervisor Benvenuto is no longer here. So maybe we replace him with someone. The chairman appointed that committee, so we can talk with him. But number one is essentially on hold to hear, because a privacy concern was one of the concerns that, deputies may have and may want to weigh in on via their union. Any other committee members on number one or Supervisor Chimides? Did I miss anything there? Okay, awesome. Do you mind scrolling to number two, Sherry? Number two talks about whether an officer can or cannot view the body camera footage before they make their sworn statement. The recommendation in Supervisor Chimides' document is that they make a statement based on their memory of the event without watching the footage, and modify or supplement their statement after watching the footage. They can, but it builds trust with the public. This is another one that went for potential review from the union. I know that the DA and the public defender had a lot to say on this regarding potential cases and other things that might be happening in investigations and other things. This is one of the documents that I will share with the group after this, dated July 1st. Supervisor Chimides prepared a document about reviewing footage. And I do also have 1 to 6, I don't know, there's a bunch of other municipalities and kind of what they do regarding allowing or not allowing officers to view the statement. So I will share that out. And this is another item that is on hold, pending discussions with the union. Anything else from anyone on number two? All right. Number three talks about a firm deadline for the release of all properly redacted body camera footage within the range of 14 to 45 days from the date of a use of force incident. Really important that we're only talking about use of force incidents here. So if we don't have any, then this is a moot point. But when there is a use of force incident, we feel, or Supervisor Chimides, and I agree on this, feel that it's important to not have it held up. And again, DA Chaika and I believe mostly Zoni had some input here. If there's an ongoing investigation, does releasing footage out to the public somehow, mess with that investigation in a way that would be detrimental to if there was actually a criminal investigation and the DA was either moving forward or not with charges, would releasing it to the public create something? So what we talked about was just having a clear policy. And this is one that I actually not only have a document from Supervisor Chimides dated July 3rd, but I will be sending out the city of Chicago's. There's an assembly bill that talks about it, and also something from the ACLU regarding it. And I believe, and please correct me, Supervisor Chimides or others if I'm wrong, I believe one of the conversations was that the way it could be worded, there would be a way to write it that would allow for the DA to be able to properly do his job and for it not to interfere with ongoing investigations or potential criminal charges. And in those cases, there may be an instance where it's not released if it was to potentially interfere, but that at least we have a clear set policy. So it's not just kind of based on, who gets it and how long they want to take. It's defined that within these parameters, we're going to release it here. There are some caveats, and those caveats have to do with an ongoing investigation or prosecution or other things. Anything more? Michael, did I memorize that? Oh, go ahead.
This is Gary Graziano. Can I have a minute?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so as you review each one of these, is it important to have some of the new members know the opinions of some of us on this committee in regards to, this 1 through 8? For an example, number 2, I would be against not allowing an officer to review that? Is that something we should be putting out there, or are we just listening at this point?
So I think we can go either way with number 1 and 2 and 6, I believe it is in the union discussions. There wasn't really a clear, for me, it was kind of pending what they said and then to come back to this group for us to discuss. There were
Okay.
things that we all, agreed on. And if I portray that incorrectly, please chime in and say, no, I didn't agree to that. But I'm also happy to have those discussions. The way I look at it is 1, 2, and 6 are kind of right now out of our hands, and we really have to see what the union and the group that's created to work with the union have to say, and then it'll come back to this committee. And that might also change our says like, yeah, I doubt they will, but if the union says, yeah, we want our deputies to not review the footage ahead of time, that's what our deputies want, then we as a group might have a very different conversation than if it comes back more like, oh, no, we want to be able to view the footage. And so I think that's important in the conversation. But I also defer to Rob on this, because Rob, you're the new one to the committee, and would it be helpful for you to hear from other members on where they stand on some of these issues?
So there's 6 items, correct?
There's 8.
There's 8. So I would suggest you continue go through the 8. Then I think we should go back to 1. I'd like to understand the opinions of everybody in the group, and I'd also like to understand the opinion of the sheriff on this group. And I'd also like to hear from the district attorney's office as to the reasoning of the opposition, just so I can wrap my head around all of this and everybody know. Then we're back all on the same page, and then I think it would be better to move forward after that.
Okay. Does that work for you, Gary?
Sure does.
Okay, awesome. Number 4 is about banning video manipulation methods. So the sheriff was this, but not with the way that it was written. So it was asked that we reword it and to everybody, but the rewording reads as follows: when releasing body camera footage, videos must be released with the full buffer mode attached at the playhead and not just once the camera was activated through the event button. The full unaltered footage should be included and not footage that is altered through methods including zooming, cropping, slowing motion, and any graphical overlays in their official releases. The clause does not apply to internal usage of footage. Files can be compressed or converted to a different file type in order to make transferring the file easier, so long as the overall footage remains consistent for the viewer. Footage may be redacted or blurred for privacy reasons. If a redaction occurs for privacy reasons, it must be and shall include a description of the redaction and the reason. The written redaction shall be made available to the public. Video stills, including stills with modifications such as zooming in, may be released to the public to aid in an investigation. However, if the full footage is not also released, an explanation as to the reason why the full video is not released must be made in writing and made available to the public. This one was still being reviewed by this group. We didn't have a board per se with it, but some of the concerns that were raised by the sheriff was, sometimes you have to zoom in on someone's face if there's a burglary and you have, video footage of what their face looks like. You might need to zoom in on that and put it, on the television to ask for people, do you know this person? And the full release of the film is so people can see it in its unadulterated version, but that there's certainly uses and zooming in and other things, but we haven't yet come to a conclusion on this. It was basically asked to be rewritten. I rewrote it and sent it out on October 5th, and then we didn't have the next meeting. So that's one of the items that we still are discussing as a group, or at the point we're still discussing as a group. All right. Number 5, this is one that this group and the previous sheriff all agreed to, and it's basically asking for a note in the video file for every time a video file is opened, downloaded, shared, or modified in any way. Obviously, this is an internal tracking just to make sure that somebody can't have access to a video and change it without knowing that they had access to that file and changed it. Number 6 is another one that is going to the union for input. Explicitly require officers to inform a member of the public that they are being filmed whenever possible. We realize that it's not always possible, so putting that wording in there makes it so that they're not going to, put themselves or others in danger because they have to, shout that out. But when it is possible, to let people know that they're being recorded. Number again, two that were agreed to by the prior committee and by the prior sheriff. But again, like Rob said, we can go through and see where the new sheriff stands on these and hear from other members. Number 7 is explicitly banning the creation of suspect arrays out of body camera footage where no crime has taken place. I doubt this would ever happen, but putting it in writing is a really good thing, that you can't take, Joe standing outside of the convenience store and no crime has occurred and be like, hey, he looks like a scary guy and there was a robbery, so we're going to cut his face out of that video that we took from the convenience store and put him into a lineup. And number 8 was opting out of all data sharing agreements with Axon. This also came up with the school resource officers having the body camera policy. And if you remember, Rob, as a board, we actually modified the language in the resolution for them to wear the body cameras, that the opt-out had to occur. So I don't know if that has yet happened. I know that Sheriff Bartlett, before leaving, didn't rewrite the policy to include it. It was a goal of his. I think as long as the sheriff's office has checked the opt-out button or whatever they need to do for there. So that's kind of where we left off. Before we go back through, are there any committee members or the DA or PD or Michael, as far as things I might have missed or things I may have misrepresented or a different understanding you had of something? Okay, great. Rob, I really like your idea of now going back through and hearing specifically, especially from the new sheriff, but also from other committee members. I think for 1, 2, and 6, my personal view is because they're going to the union, we can discuss them, of course, but I wouldn't spend a ton of time on them. And especially focusing on which were previously agreed to see if the new sheriff is also on board or if there's questions, but we can take that as it comes. Hey, Rob, I just have a member of the public here and I'm the only office open. Will you guide the discussion for a minute, starting with number 1? I'll be right back.
Can we bring that back up, Sherry? Please. So where's number 1? I'm sorry. Oh, set buffer mode to record audio and video for 120 seconds. Before the event button is pressed, longer recordings provide more transparency and demonstrate the county's. So, Sheriff, where are you on? Where do you stand on this 120 seconds? I think that's beyond if I'm not mistaken, what the state's rules and regs are currently. Isn't that correct? Or is that the state's already policy and procedure?
Supervisor, we started this body cam program, and from what I understand and my past knowledge, it was much shorter than our current audio time of video and audio time, which is now 1 minute. We've attempted some longer durations, but we're running into issues with privacy of the deputies, and I just don't foresee us moving it any further period at this point. So I would say that 120 is much too long of a duration. The union has some issues with it as well, so that's kind of where I stand on it right now.
So if I could I chime in here?
Sure, go ahead.
So when we're talking about privacy issues, when we were going through this whole policy, the sheriff at the time was making it very clear that he had sole discretion over the recommendation body. But I've always been under myself the impression that we can ask the union for input, but it really is the sheriff's discretion, right? Because it's a administrative function. With that being said, we talked quite extensively about this topic, and we were looking at 120 seconds. We were looking, and then the low end of 30 seconds. And at the end of the day, though, after all the conversation, when we were going back to the union about a compromise of 60 seconds. And so, and we were looking at a 60 seconds of audio and video. And so that's where we kind of left it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, the compromise that we were asking for was 60 seconds audio and video, and previously it was only 30 seconds, I believe, audio only. And so to hear you, Sheriff Krapp, say that it is now 60 seconds audio and video makes me really happy. So that was kind of the compromise that the people who were advocating for longer were looking to get to, that with the prior sheriff, we didn't reach that compromise. So am I understanding correctly that it's 60 seconds audio and video currently?
Supervisor, I think I misspoke. We're looking at the 1 minute time parameter now. We've been running into some problems with, like I said, some issues, and I'll be honest with you. Some of the issues we ran into are issues with, deputies in a restroom. And this is something that we're really looking at this, and we want to make sure we're making the right decision before we press on any further. A short time here in office, there's been a lot of things we've been trying to take, just police reform, internal issues as well. So we are looking into it. We are we have been working with a 1 minute mark, but we're having some real issues with that.
So Sheriff, this is presently you're doing what?
Presently, we're doing a 30-second video only.
Only or audio only?
It's 30 seconds video only.
Okay, so that's.
So a part of when we were getting into the privacy thing and the whole restroom issue was in relations to, it was really talking about the activation of the cameras, right, in proximity to other incidents. Because what it was brought up to us is, if you had an incident that was happening and the officer was near that particular incident, it could activate their camera. And then we got into the whole discussion of, would an officer actually be using the restroom near where an incident was taking place, and what was the probability of that? So when we were talking about privacy, officer's camera generally isn't activated when they're in the restroom or a scenario like that. It's activated either when they activate it themselves, at least this is what my understanding is, when they activate it themselves, or when they're in the proximity of an incident that is taking place where a camera of another officer was activated.
Yeah, Supervisor Hughes, I can tell you that from a personal standpoint, I was in the courthouse last year when a troop car went by and my camera was activated. And unfortunately, I was in that situation exactly, going, what is going on here? Why is my camera now vibrating when I'm in the restroom? I was quite uncomfortable with that, but it does have some area. And if you're active, if your patrol unit is active, state police patrol unit is active, or we're testifying in the courthouse. The state police have holster brake activation. So one of the troopers' holsters was faulty. The trigger was faulty on it. The trigger for the activation was faulty, and it was setting ours off continuously in the courthouse again. So I think it all depends on where, when, and how. It's situational, and there's a lot of things we need to take into account. So, I mean, we're 643 square miles, and we have a lot of law enforcement personnel in that area. So at any time, it can be triggered by another agency.
Yeah. So, Sheriff, and I don't want to belabor this because I know Supervisor Hotel said we want to move on, but that incident, and by the way, it's Bill. I'm no longer supervisor. So, but that incident, whether it was 20 seconds, 30 seconds, or 60 seconds, could occur still. And that was the thing that we were bringing up is, obviously technology fails us at times, and maybe we could work on improving that. But the incident in which you refer to could happen if you only had 30 seconds recording time, which you have right now. So if we were doing 60 seconds, does that add any more probability to it happening?
Well, it adds 30 seconds of probability, I suppose. But I mean, we had, I can only speak from personal experience with the body cams, where we had a situation, again, in security services. We were able to activate our cameras mid-incident because that was the safest time we could happen pretty quickly. And we were able to catch the whole entire incident with the 30-second rollback. So, it's just something we have to do more review on.
Okay. Thank you.
Sheriff, what is currently the state's guideline for that?
The state and the current vendor, Axon, is 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Michael Trimides, I know you had a question.
You're muted, Michael.
I just wanted to clarify on the word guideline, as I think Axon, I think people like maybe the most frequent usage might be 30 seconds, but I don't think there's any kind of study or recommendation that 30 seconds be used other than the fact that it's frequent. So I just want to be clear, just clarify about the word guideline.
But I thought, Michael, that the state had its own following the state's policy, which is 30 seconds. Is that correct? Or did I misspeak?
I think the state has some recommendations that in the policy itself, like in the text itself, it describes it as a minimum set of standards. Okay. And that the intention, it says this within the text, it says that the local municipalities should customize those things for their needs. So it's not appropriate to say, well, they put 30 seconds in this document because that's like a minimum set of standards. So that shouldn't be a reason to not do more just because it's like the minimum. We should come up with like what is the best thing for our county. And so we might decide that 30 seconds is the best. I think we're better off going for more, but I think but I don't want to avoid a discussion about pros and cons just because 30 seconds is the floor.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. And again, number one is going to, go for union discussion. Any other member of the committee or otherwise that want to speak on number one before we go to number two? Okay. I'm scrolling down to the second one there. This again is one that's going in front of the union, but I would, since we did hear from Sheriff Bartlett prior to his stance on this, and any other committee members that wanted to speak on it. Sheriff Krapp, number two talks about whether an officer can view the body camera footage of a critical incident. Again, we're only talking about critical incidents before they make their sworn statement. Do you have a initial stance on this?
Looking at this, and again, I'm perceiving this a little different than the last administration. Possibly, one of my presentation for IDC school was just about what happens during an incident, especially a critical incident. There's certain things that we perceive and we do take note of as through muscle memory, through training. That may not be something that comes out in the forefront of our mind when we're actually, now the situation is over and we're in a safe location. So, I think it's important that, to view this footage. I mean, we need to perceive everything we were perceiving at the time of the incident. So I think it's important that we allow them to do that in order to make a true and accurate statement. And if I could just piggyback on that, I would really like to also extend the offer for everyone here on the committee to come to our simulator and see exactly what it's like in a high stress situation, and then actually do a statement without reviewing your footage and make a statement, a verbal statement after reviewing it. There's going to be some things that you perceive that you notice when you're under stress that you're not going to remember on the forefront of your brain after you're in a safe spot.
If I could, Supervisor Hotel.
Dave Hall, I think, raised his hand first.
But you can be next, Bill.
Okay.
Is it me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to bring up an angle to this, which is witnesses, victims, and accused might not have the luxury of reviewing the footage. And so they're going to have to rely in their testimony on their memory only. I think we are possibly setting up an unequal situation where members of the public are at a disadvantage if police officers are able to view footage in advance before relating their memories of an incident, whereas the public is not.
Thanks, Dave. Bill?
So Dave kind of beat me to the punch on that particular incident stance. I firmly believe exactly what he says, but I also believe out of all the 8 points, a point that union should have some say, it would be this one. I do think the unions should have some say, because this isn't a situation where an officer's not only their life but their career could be put in jeopardy depending on whatever the situation. But I firmly believe it under the current policy, it sets an unfair standard for sure.
Thanks, Bill. Gary?
As I stated earlier, this is, in my opinion, totally unfair to law enforcement to have to put a report without reviewing it. Some of the situations these folks are put in, there's absolutely no way they can get everything right. You got a shooting and something heavy like that going down. You cannot expect them to know exactly when this happened, when that happened. And if Shane's still on, I would think that this would be a public defender's rainbow to be able to catch an officer not having something exactly right or the time off a little bit. I gotcha situation, and I don't think it's fair.
John Rivero has his hand up, I think.
That's Lieutenant Logden for me.
Oh, okay.
The undersheriff is here, and I'd like to comment on that as well. And I thank Bill Hughes for his recognizing certain things that happened. I'd like to comment from the perspective of having sat with officers who have been involved in shootings. As many of you know, I was in the assistance program, and we did critical incident stress debriefings after all of the events. One specific event was after a shooting. It was an officer-involved shooting where one of our guys took a bullet off of a helmet. And it was not until, I think there were 3 officers that shot in that incident. It was not until we did the critical incident stress they could actually put the pieces together to have it make sense for themselves. One realized a second officer was in the room. And the reason that happens is when you are in fight or flight mode, specifically fight mode, and wanting to save your life, and someone's pointing a gun at you, your periphery is gone. What you see is the barrel of the gun, in their exact words, is it looks 10 times larger than it really is. Time slows down, and you don't get to put the pieces of the puzzle together until you oftentimes speak to someone else who might have been present. So there is a physiological response that prevents oftentimes critical incidents being able to put the pieces together and then following that. I've been on scene with officers literally standing in front of a photocopy machine that he used every day, and he couldn't figure out the buttons. So in a perfect world, a lot of what we're asking for is nice. But in the real world and in for policing, it could really, as Bill Hughes said, do away with someone's job when they've done nothing wrong. So my personal recommendation for having gone through, having sat with officers who've been subjected to these and gone through these incidents is that, there's always cursory information, because you have to have someone put a sworn statement in immediately after an event when they have that adrenaline rush, and not knowing everything that's there is going to lead to a bigger problem.
Bill?
Thank you, Under Sheriff.
Yeah, and hearing that, because I hadn't heard it, articulated in that fashion before, and I certainly appreciate that, Under Sheriff. I would change my opinion on that in side on that taking.
Thanks, Bill. Any other committee members want to weigh in? Again, this is one that's going to go to the union, so we can talk about it again when it comes back. Mr. Zoni.
It's not so much my opinion on which way this goes, because I think I indicated in prior forums, for purposes of myself as a public defender, it doesn't really matter in my ability to do my job. I did want to just know one thing. The victims, defendants, will have the opportunity under the new discovery rules to review any and all videos. And that was the case prior to the change in the discovery for any videos that the prosecution wanted to put in at evidence. And now we get to see everything that's relevant to the case. Just so that's clear that's the case now. And I just wanted to, I think someone had indicated that victims don't, or defendants don't have times to review it, and they do. They may not have time to review it before they give a statement, but a lot of I think committee members' concerns about to defendants and witnesses, that's a lot of what the trial system is about. That's part and parcel of what cross-examination is about, is correcting perceived errors or people's original testimony or statements. That's what we do, prosecutors and defense attorneys.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zoni. Anybody else on number 2 before we move on to number 3? Okay. Number 3, I am reading the minutes from our last October meeting, and there was just one more piece I did want to add. The group did review some other policies and agreed that the New York City policy, which I will send out to everyone, policy that we should look at to then potentially amend and work with to create into a policy that works potentially for our county. It did address some of the concerns that the DA and others had regarding, prosecution and other matters. It did have a lot of language in there. So again, I will send it out to all of the committee members. We can review it in detail. Sheriff Kraft, obviously, you're going to want to take a look at it. At the end, it'll be, up to you to adopt a policy or not. But I will send that out to everyone. And at the last meeting, that was kind of the good model to start with. Obviously, we're different than New York City. There's going to be modifications we might want to make, but that had a good starting point to develop into a potential policy for the county regarding release of footage. Sheriff Kraft, did you want to speak to this at all, or would you rather read that policy that I'm talking about before commenting?
Supervisor, I actually have that policy. It's pretty lengthy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've gotten to the first few pages, but again, we've been really busy here at the Sheriff's Office. There's a lot of things to catch up on. One thing I would say is that, if the committee has time to read any Lieutenant Colonel Grossman's, science is another good, a good resource to check in on some of these policies, just to see what occurs in the human body when we're dealing with that. And obviously, the training that police officers get is the one thing that really sets us apart from anyone else, and that's when we refer back to our mammalian brains. Our training kicks in. So a lot of these things, again, I would say we're looking at, and we want to be part of the solution. And but some of the things we just have to stand fast on based on what we're dealing with as well.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any other committee members or anyone else on the call want to talk about number 3? Like I said, there's a policy to kind of read through that we might want to do before we get into in-depth discussion. But does anyone have anything else for number 3?
Supervisor, I actually have, it's fortuitous because First Sergeant Bohm just stepped in and he does our redactions. And there's ways that we can reduce the time, the amount of time it's going to take us to redact, but it's very costly. Currently, we're doing everything manually, frame by frame by frame. When we got our software, we weren't allowed to the finances to get the program for that. In the future, we may be able to, afford to do that here at the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, but it's extremely, timely to go frame by frame, and the longer the footage is, the longer it's going to take. So, just so you know.
So, Sheriff, can I ask, with this software, does it do it through some sort of algorithm, or how is it that things that are going to be redacted, how are they chosen?
Yeah, I'm gonna let First Sergeant Bohm speak on that, since he has more expertise in that department.
Good afternoon. In terms of what is redacted and what is not, currently we do not have the auto redaction software, which is what Sheriff Kraft was discussing in terms of making it easier to redact video. We do have to do it frame by frame manually. And that is done with the guidance of the FOIA law and other privacy laws in terms of what is redacted and what is not. Hopefully in the future, we would be able to get the funding for the auto redaction software.
Do you know how much it costs, John? Or I'm sorry, Lieutenant Rivera, do you know what the cost on that is?
It's First Sergeant Bohm. We do not have a cost. We have reached out to Axon to see what the cost is for that. We are waiting to hear back.
Thank you, Sergeant Bohm. Dave or Bill, did one of you have a hand raised?
Nope.
You asked the question for me. I was wondering, how costly it was, and could we get that in the budget?
But isn't this a prosecution issue as well? I'd like to hear from the DA's office on this one, because sometimes investigations take time, and things should not be, footage should not just take on certain types of cases. Just curious as to their position. They think that could be a problem.
Forgive me, Mr. Supervisor, but would you ask that again?
It says set a firm date for the release of all properly redacted body camera footage within the range of 14 to 45 days. To set a firm date for that, sometimes there's still investigation going on, still things going on. I just was curious from the prosecution's standpoint as well as the defendant's standpoint, what your position is on that.
Well, our dates are dictated by the arrest of the defendant. So, as always, and as I've expressed from the beginning of the formation of this committee, decisions primarily are made are solely made by the sheriff, notwithstanding any recommendations the committee may make. Nextly, any decisions that are controlled by the criminal procedure law obviously govern, and those decisions are governed by the, with respect to issues such as these, are governed by arrest dates, and arrest dates will dictate when and if release to be made. And we cannot release information in an ongoing investigation unless and until an arrest is actually made in such a manner as to jeopardize an investigation. So it would appear to me, and I believe the sheriff would agree, that any policy on his part that would jeopardize an investigation that would not be affected by the criminal procedure law would be anathema to any appropriate policy on his part or any law enforcement agency's part.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the position of trying to go through a lot of policy quickly. And I wanted to give a little bit of framing to this document. And I think one of the challenges is that the document kind of lays out some basic principles that are, and in order to do that briefly, it has to be kind of summarily and at top level. But for many of these issues that we sort of have over the course of the review panel process created deeper documents that have more data and have more case examples that kind of flush out some of these what if scenarios. So in some ways, the police reform process, to sort of remind us of why we're here, was we've seen these sort of major incidents around the country that happen. There was, the George Floyd incident that sort of kicked off a lot of this process, but we sort of see these national moments that frequent basis of sort of like worst case scenario. And I think one of the goals of the reform process in general and of the body cameras is to prevent the worst case scenarios from happening here in Columbia County and to provide some level of trust between the government and the public. So some of this is, if there is somebody who has bad intentions, what kind of guardrails do we have to put things on the right path and to build trust? And so for example, with the firm deadline of release is that when there are really bad incidents, the public is going to want to see this footage, and we should have some sort of process of here's how we release the footage. And if we don't like 14 to 45, we can talk about those days. In the more specific plan, there are sort of like guardrails for all these sort of emergencies to say, well, if there's an ongoing investigation, this is how we would decide to not release things. And it's actually better to say, well, we're following our policy. And during an ongoing investigation, we don't release footage. And this is the person who decides that. And you can kind of show the public that's what we're doing, as opposed to sort of an incident where something happens and there's a lot of controversy. If you don't have policies, everybody sort of points to a conspiracy and it looks really bad. And I think there are some incidents in Columbia County where that's happened, where because we didn't have policies to point to, it made things worse.
Wait, may I interrupt?
Yeah.
What policy? What incidents are you referring to? That
well, certainly like
happened in Columbia County. That gave someone the impression that something bad happened in law enforcement.
But I think certainly the public had a lot of interest in the Handy case and what happened there. And I think if we had more clear policies that we had made prior to that we could point to, I think there would have been more. There could have been a situation.
Mr. Supervisor, do you think it's a good idea for a public official such as yourself to talk about a case that is still pending?
I think it's fair to say that the public had concerns, and it's good to have public relations policies.
It's a good idea for a public official such as yourself to be talking about a case that's pending?
Well, you're the one who asked me to name a case, so maybe it was a mistake.
Yeah, if I could, and in all fairness, you did ask him for an example, and he didn't go into any details of any pending investigation. He simply said the public was interested in that case, and I think that's
if I may, Madam Supervisor, Mr. Supervisor Committee referred in the plural. Are there cases that are closed that you may refer to Mr. Supervisor Comides?
I guess I'm not going to get into that at this point.
You broached the subject. Are there cases that are closed that you believe that the public has reason to believe that the law enforcement has failed the public?
Cases that people talk about that there have been lawsuits, right, that have involved police, where the lawsuits were settled. So clearly, I mean, some of those might be years ago, but there certainly are incidents that are local that people have concerns about. And there were during our whole testimony where people came and talked about incidents. So the fact that there is some mistrust, I think, is a given, and that some of that mistrust is based on, like, I'm not going into the case, but obviously there are incidents where people don't have trust.
Well, you're not suggesting either Sheriff Kraft or Under Sheriff Salvador are involved, are you?
I'm not suggesting that anybody in particular is involved. I'm saying that it's good to have policies that build trust.
This committee is dealing with the sheriff's office, and you're not suggesting either Under Sheriff Salvador or Sheriff Kraft are involved.
No, I'm certainly not doing that.
That's. I just wanted to clarify that, and I think that's. Thank you.
And I think, you're speaking to an overarching why it's good to have policies, not necessarily specifics. And one thing I do want to clarify for you, Sheriff Kraft, and I will send this around, but the policy that we were talking about modeling from New York City is only 2 pages. So don't read a 50-page document. That's not the document we're referring to. I will resend it out. And it does address the DA's concerns and Supervisor Lagonia's concerns. So I would ask that before next meeting, everybody read this model policy, and specifically DA Chaika with your concerns reading the policy, because it talks about, the need to comply with federal, state, and local public disclosure laws, supersedes this policy. And it does talk about that public release of the footage may be delayed, or in some go public release, in order to comply with a court order or restraining order, or comply with federal, state, or local law governing disclosure of records. So it does address those things. And what I was saying in the beginning is I think there's a way to have a policy that lays out the process while still addressing areas where we're in compliance with all criminal procedure laws, making sure we're not harming or potentially harming any investigations. I think we can do all of that. And so I would urge everyone to read. I will send it back around. It's 2 pages. It's not that in depth, to read this policy, because I do think it addresses a lot of the concerns. But for people who have concerns, especially the DA and the sheriff, look at it through that lens of those concerns and see, does it address them? Is there language we could add in that would address them? Bill Hughes.
Yeah, thank you. Please do send that document to me. And I will say to Mr. DA, you demonstrated your prosecutorial skills. But to this specific issue,
Mr. Supervisor, I'm not prosecuting anybody today.
I just said you showed your skills. I didn't say that you were one. So that was a.
Didn't want to give any. I just wanted to make sure no one got the impression that anyone was speaking ill of Donnie or Jackie. That's all.
Okay.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
But to this point, is when we're looking at this, there are a lot of scenarios and situations that could happen. We can have a judge rule in this, and so I agree to some of that we're talking about. But to put a specific time, or not to put a time at all, I think is where the point is. Where where should we have a time on it, or should we not have a time on it? And if we are to have a time on it, what is that time to be? And that's kind of where I'm at. I would like for us to have this information released. Obviously, it's a decision to be made by the sheriff, but this, at what point in time is this information to be released to the public? Can't say no time, because that has led to some of the incidents that Supervisor Chimides brought up, is that the information wasn't released in a timely fashion, or was it released at all? We certainly don't want to get into that kind of situation. So I think the discussion should be the information being released, and at what particular time would it be released?
Well, I think the district attorney stated, I mean, some of this should just coincide with what the criminal procedure law is and the penal law, as opposed to a separate policy. It should all coincide with that. I mean, there are certain things that and I understand, and it's good to have these discussions where that the public can put whatever they want on Facebook, but they're not entitled to certain information, especially if it's an ongoing investigation. I was also involved in law enforcement because I was a judge for 16 years, but there are certain things that they're just not entitled to. I mean, there's an ongoing investigation, and that has to stay with the district attorney's office and the sheriff's department. So to me, to have times and dates, which are fine, but they should coincide to me with criminal procedure law and or, the penal law. That's where we should put specific times. And I agree with you, Bill, but they shouldn't be arbitrary numbers, and they shouldn't be different than what's already set by state legislature, in my opinion.
Thank you. And Co-Chair Ligonia, we typically try to keep these meetings to 1 hour. Realize we only, we did a summary and then we got through number 3. But in the interest of that, we do also ask Oswaldo at the end to look at YouTube, and we leave 5 minutes for any public comment just to be read into the record, or if the public has questions that we may be able to answer, or we may need to get back to them. Are you okay with us stopping there and checking if there's any public comment and then coming back?
I'm fine, but obviously this is going to be a very lengthy discussion that's going to take quite some time to do this correct committee, and to do it once a month, it's going to take a very long time. So I'm fine with ending it here. I'm not sure why there's an hour threshold on all of these meetings if we're going to do it once a month. To me, I'd prefer to spend a little more time and get, some things concluded in the future, but it is a full committee. I know everybody's busy. So if that's the intent, then as I said, it's going to take months to do this, but that's fine. So yes.
So I would actually be open if the rest of the committee is. I actually have another thing scheduled because we've always kept it to an hour. I do agree that we've already been working on this for months and months, and we're not even through, body cameras. And to remember too, that there's way more than body cameras that are in the reform plan that we need to address. Is the committee open to shifting it to a 2-hour window that we might not need the whole 2 hours, but putting in our calendar a 1 to
or an hour and a half even maybe would be better, but I'm fine with whatever the committee decides. It's just a suggestion.
I mean, I'm open to a time change as long as we have it set. I couldn't do it today.
That's fine.
Dave?
I, as a member of the taxpaying public, take this really, really seriously. And I know we have a lot to cover, and the hour-long thing has been very easy. I'm perfectly prepared to go longer, meet more frequently. I think this is really, really important stuff we're doing.
Okay. Is there anyone who's on the committee or here, such as, Mr. Chaika, that really needs to be here that is not open, being calendared for 2 hours, whether we need that much or not? We can see. Is there anyone that's opposed to that? Okay, awesome. So next month we'll do a 1 to 3 window. If we only need an hour and a half, great. But there is a lot to discuss. And Oswaldo, do you mind checking on YouTube if there's been any public comment or questions? Okay, wonderful. So just a quick recap. I am going to check with Elena on where we're at with the union negotiations, and the chairman on potentially replacing Supervisor Benvenuto with a new member. And I'm going to send all of the documents out to the entire committee. I'm going to send a separate email with that New York City policy because I don't want it to get lost in the looking at a 50-page document when it's really a 2-page. So I'm going to send 2 separate emails, one with just that New York City policy and notes about what we're looking at, and the other with every other document we've discussed. Even though we didn't get to it today, I am also going to include the documents on the citizen review panel because we did start discussions previously on them, and then everyone has all the documents in one place. I wonder, Sherry, would it be easy enough, Sherry or Oswaldo, to just create like a Google Doc link for this committee that committee members and, the PD and the DA and all supervisors have access to, where we can just have all the documents posted, so if they don't have to scroll through their emails to find them before each meeting?
Yep. I mean, all the documents that we've talked about are posted on the website, but I can do it in a shared Google Doc if you'd prefer.
Oh, are they all on the website?
I believe so. I think everything that we've
Okay.
used, just double check it. And if I'm missing anything, I can post it. If not, I can easily do a shared Google Docs or a drop. And if you want to put, then people can put comments on it if they want to.
Okay.
If you want to do something like that, that's easy enough
Yeah.
to do.
I'll go check the website, and if there's any missing, I'll send them to you.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Mussman.
Yeah, and I keep hearing the district attorney saying that it's all up to the sheriff to make these decisions. And so I'm just curious if the reform committee has really if the reform committee continues to be shut down by the majority, and it appears that the district attorney suggests that we're really this is a useless committee. I'm wondering, is this just an exercise, or are the voices of the community really going to be heard? That's just my concern.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Supervisor Mussman. I will say there are some things like the Citizen Review Board that actually the chairman appointed to. So although body camera policy is one where the sheriff's office has the ultimate ability to set policy, I do think Sheriff Krapf and prior to him, Sheriff Bartlett were both really open to working with this committee and hearing from this committee. And although I think there are some areas where even the committee doesn't necessarily agree, we have also made recommendations and brought things to the sheriff's office that I do believe will be incorporated in their policy. So I don't feel like it's useless work, so to speak. But there's other things that we're going to get to, such as the Citizen Review Board, that don't fall under the discretion of the sheriff's office, and that we as supervisors, could set policy on. So I think that because we started with body camera policy, and body camera policy and sheriff's office policies do fall under the sheriff's discretion, it can feel like, what are we doing here? We don't really have a say. But great progress up until now. And I do realize it's a slow process. But like Supervisor Lagonia said, I think it's really important. And I think that the chairman put this committee together with different perspectives and different life, having been a judge or having been in law enforcement, having just been a member of the public. And I think that those perspectives are important for us to take the time to really discuss and hash out.
Sheriff raised his hand for a second. Yeah.
Yep. Sheriff Krapp.
Yeah, I just want to comment. I mean, every single day we're here in the office, we're looking for ways to better serve the community. This is not something we take lightly. There's going to be things that we don't even touch on in police reform that we're doing on a daily basis. We're budgeting items to better keep track of data. We're trying to take better care of our citizens on the street and our citizens here that are incarcerated individuals. So, I mean, we do take this seriously, and I know this is a painstaking thing that we're dealing with, but we do take it extremely seriously, and any comments that come in, we are open to. So I can't say we'll change policy based on them. We're definitely open to hear from all aspects.
Thank you, Sheriff. Anything from anyone else before we adjourn? Okay, and thank you all for being open to the date change with my schedule. The next meeting will be Tuesday, March 1st, right? First Tuesday of the month at 1 o'clock. So we'll do a 1 to 3 window on Tuesday, March 1st. And thank you all so much for your time. And we'll adjourn the meeting at 2:09 p.m. Rob, did you have anything else?
No, just thank you, everybody. The comments were, very well appreciated, and I'm happy to be a part of this. Thank you.